Hello everyone, and here we have a new story. Before we get to that, I want to ask you to subscribe, like, and be sure to write comments in order to participate in the development of the community. Write how to improve my community, current topics and the stories you are interested in, and much more. I read and listen to all the comments. People write me stories by mail from different countries. There are problems with translation. I apologize for this. I will work on it and try to fix these errors. I want to thank everyone for their support and the people who wrote to me by mail, broadcast news stories. New videos on my channel are published once every 2 days at 7 p.m. Don't forget to put a bell in order not to miss new videos. And now let's go. Hello, I want to tell you my story. My family and I moved to another city 2 years ago. We lived like everyone else and gradually got used to the new city for us. Our children started going to kindergarten. My wife has new married friends. We were family friends and sometimes celebrate holidays together. The husbands of these girls told me what good wives they had, but that's not the point. We have been living in this city for 3 months now, and my wife and I have started to move away from each other. She talks on the phone with new friends every day, helps them solve their problems and so on. In our family, I work 6 days a week. My wife is raising our children. I always thought that a girl should stay at home. A year later, my wife started complaining that she was tired of sitting in 4 walls. She asked for permission to relax with her friends, and I didn't mind, because I knew that raising children is not easy either. I tried to divide this responsibility 50-50-50. If have sleepless nights, then take turns. In general, I let my wife go without hesitation. A week later, my wife goes to meet her friends again. Maybe we would have gone together, but someone had to babysit. After a while, my wife's friend came to visit us with her husband and children. We had a great time, but my wife wanted a sequel. But I didn't want to let her go alone. As a result, the husband of my wife's friend decided to keep her company. My wife's friend didn't mind. I thought there was nothing in it and let her go again. A week later, we decided to go to the beach. I was driving and decided not to drink alcohol. We went to the beach with 2 families. The 3 of them drank a lot of alcohol. I decided to go home because it's time for our children to go to bed. Upon arrival home, my wife wanted to continue. I was totally against it. We had a row, and my wife locked herself in the toilet and talked to someone on the phone. I heard her say, "Get me out of here." Anyway, in front of her friends, she threw a tantrum and insulted me in front of them. As a result, my wife left home. According to her, she went to spend the night with her friend. I am not a stupid person and immediately draw attention to the phone number and done the detailing of my wife's mobile phone. As a result, there was a surprise for me, which made my breathing quicken. For 2 years, my wife has been writing and calling this man. I started to dig a lot deeper. When my wife came home, I started asking her, "Who is this?" She didn't know that I had done the detailing. As it turned out, this is my wife's ex-boyfriend. He has a wife and 2 children. By the way, he is 10 years older than my wife. My wife called him in front of me to hurt me. My wife was in an inadequate state. My wife and I have lived together for 8 years. She ran after me for 2 days and asked me for forgiveness. She swore by the health of our children that this would not happen again. But after a while, we had a party. My wife has gone crazy again. She ran away from home, followed by her friend and husband. I couldn't help myself and was very angry. I packed up, got in the car, and left for work. 3 hours later, my wife calls me from her home phone. I ask her what happened. She tells me she doesn't know. I was very angry and hung up the phone. She called me nonstop before lunch, but I ignore her. My child has been playing football for a year now. Need to take your son to the football field twice a week. That's why my wife asked her friend to take our child with her. A French child also played football. After a while, we decided to fly to Florida with the whole family. The first day was very difficult. It was a hard road, and tired, we stayed in the rooms. On the second day, we decided to cook a barbecue. We had a good time and met a girl who was vacationing at this hotel. We invited the girl to our table and started chatting. Our children were playing around us. After a while, I realized that I needed to put the children to bed. My wife's friend and I picked up the kids and went to our rooms. As always, I put the children to bed and fell asleep with them. I woke up suddenly in the night, even though it never happened. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and my wife was not in the room. I ran to my wife's friend's room, but her husband wasn't there either. I woke up my wife's friend and asked where her husband was. She replied that she didn't care where he was. I was furious. I already had suspicions when I let her go to nightclubs. She always warned me about everything, but this time she just disappeared. I packed our things, took the kids, and got in the car. Succumbing to emotions, I scratched the side of the car and bumper. On the way home, I saw my wife with this man. I stopped and told him to fuck off. But 2 minutes later, I realized that I had been drinking alcohol yesterday. I needed a place to stay and sleep. After 15 minutes, my wife started calling me and threatening me. She said she would go to the police and say that I had taken the children from her. So I decided to give her the children. She ran up to me and slapped me. After that, she took the children and left. I sat for 20 minutes and thought, what should I do? At that moment, my wife calls me again. She asked me to return her things to her, and I drive to her. As a result, I got hit in the face again. My wife started taking all her documents and belongings. I wanted to get my documents out of my suitcase. At that moment, I was kicked in the nose. I got angry and pushed my wife. She fell to one knee and started hitting me again. When I got in the car, she was hitting me and made a dent in the door. At that moment, my wife's friend was watching the scandal and smiling maliciously. I went back to the room and drank 2 cans of beer, then fell asleep at the table. When I woke up, there was no one in the room. Everyone had gone to the beach. I waited for my wife and decided to ask where she was at night. She told me that she and her friend's husband and the girls went to a foam party at a nightclub. I started asking for forgiveness like a horned deer and tried to make amends. But she ignored me and spent with her friend all the time. All the time. It made me very nervous, but we made up. 6 days later, we flew home. Everything was fine, but when we were almost home, she threw a tantrum again. She said I was to blame for her and we should get a divorce. The next day, my wife started treating me differently. She pretended that everything was fine. But I saw that our relationship has changed. 2 days later, I took one child to his grandparents. A week later, my wife asks me to take my second child. She wanted me to stay with my parents too. According to her, she needs to be alone. Although before that, she always loved to travel with the whole family. There was one incident before our trip to Florida. One day, I returned home, but my wife and children were gone. I'm calling my wife and asking, where are you? She replies that she went shopping with her friend's husband and children. When I came to them, they asked me not to tell my wife's friend that they had gone alone. They wanted me to say that I was with them from the very beginning. I didn't attach no importance to this and agreed. As a result, I remember the case in Florida. It seemed to me that they were hiding something. I told my wife's friend that they were shopping alone at the time. She didn't believe me and said I was lying. I took the second child and went to my parents. My wife called me very avertant. It was weird because she knew I was a very responsible person. My heart ached and I knew something was wrong. I couldn't find a place for myself. At the same time, my wife reproached me for having changed. I couldn't calm down and started digging deeper. I've never been like this before. A week passes and my wife sends me back to my parents. I silently packed my things and left. At least my intuition told me not to do it. The next day, in the city where my parents lived, I was invited to a housewarming party. But I refused and told my wife that I'd rather go home. I didn't want to stand in traffic jams and wanted to return home in the evening. But my wife was very indignant and started yelling at me. She said, you wanted to stay there overnight, then why are you drive home? You've been invited to a housewarming party. Go have a beer and relax. It was very strange to hear this from my wife. I started calling my home phone more often, but he was constantly busy and I decided to call my wife on my mobile. When she answered, I asked what was wrong with the home phone. She said it was broken. I told her to try to turn it off and on, but she indignantly replied to me that she had already done it. I say, okay, then I'll call the company. I hang up the phone and immediately dial my wife's number. She answered immediately and I asked what she was doing. She told me that she was sitting and watching an interesting movie and wasn't going anywhere. I said that there was a business card in the kitchen with a contract number and a phone number, which company to call about repairs. She replied that she would find a business card and call me back. I knew that the business card was in a prominent place. After 10 minutes, I started calling my wife again, but the caller was no longer available. I started calling nonstop, but the phone was already disconnected. 40 minutes later, my wife picked up the phone. She said that the phone was dead and was charging. I asked, where have you been? She replies that she was chatting with her friend. I used the program again to find out information about my wife's mobile phone. As it turned out, my wife's friend was in another city. As a result, I gathered the children and went to sort things out. My wife stood her ground and I silently went to sleep in another room. In the morning, I left for work and wrote applications to the company. I wanted to be provided with a list of incoming and outgoing numbers. As a result, I observed one mobile number from which we were very often called to our home phone. I asked a girl I know at work to call this number and find out who it is. She called and told me there was a man there. This man introduced himself as Alfred. That was the name of my wife's friend's husband. He worked 5 days a week and his wife went to her parents for the weekend. I guessed it, but I still couldn't believe it. After that, my wife calls me and asks what have I done with our home phone. She received a notification that information has been requested in her personal account. I replied that I had not done anything with my home phone, but my wife started yelling at me and saying that I was meddling in my business. In anger, I told her not to contact her lover on her home phone anymore. At that moment, my wife fell silent, and I realized that I had caught her. I hung up the phone and started calling Alfred, but he hung up the phone and communicated only by text messages. I asked him, "What are you doing?" In response, he said that they were just talking on the phone, nothing more. They talked every day from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. When I wasn't at home, they talked all day. My wife knew that I would not forgive her for cheating. She called me and started making excuses that it was just a conversation, nothing more. They both said they were just good friends. Alfred's wife was sympathetic to this. But when I closed my eyes, I started shaking. My wife told me that I did everything so that they would not communicate with me. But I was furious and replied that I would start a pogrom in the apartment. I wanted to smash everything I bought with my own money. So I took the documents and went to court. I hired a good lawyer and filed for divorce. The divorce was very difficult because there are a lot of loans and debts for both of us. My wife tried to make peace with me, but I was relentless. I think this is the best revenge. Let my wife feel the same pain that I felt. If you like the story, give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the new video. Now let's move on to the opinion of the author of the channel. The opinion of the author of the channel. According to tradition, I want to wish our hero strength and patience. After listening to your story, I realized that you were under a lot of stress. But you did well to stand it. You made mistakes when you forgave your wife. In fact, you should have left much earlier. Letting your wife go with someone else's man is also not a good idea. I've had stories where the best friends you trusted ended up having sex with your wife, but in no case, blame yourself and move forward. I think you'll find your happiness anyway. The most important thing is not to repeat your mistakes. If you have watched to the end, I want to say thank you very much. I love you all. Thank you for joining me on this exciting journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. I appreciate your support and encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this story. Your participation and feedback are invaluable for shaping our content and promoting mutual understanding and community growth. Until we meet again.